Welcome everyone to this version of the Master of Money program brought to you by the Society to Advance Financial Education. We're pleased you've joined us live tonight on Ustream, visiting through our site or other sites around. We're awfully glad you did that. Now we are broadcasting to you live from the beautiful facilities of Harvest Investment Services in Oak Brook, Illinois. If you're ever in the Chicagoland area, we certainly welcome you to join us for one of our live programs. The Master of Money is brought to you each week to help empower people with the knowledge they need to thrive and prosper in a very difficult century that's starting. And so if you're in town, you can not only enjoy the 30-minute broadcast session, but afterwards we spend an additional 30 minutes with members of the Society who join us live. We're glad to have them, and we're certainly glad to have you here tonight. We do want to thank Harvest Investment Services for offering us this beautiful facility. It's a pleasure to be here with them each and every week. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. Last week, as we began the Master Money program, we talked about insurance. We looked at insurance from two different perspectives. We looked at its ability to help you mitigate the risks of your life, whether it's property and casualty or your life itself. And then we also talked about the use of insurance as an investment tool. We talked about three different applications there: annuities, and we spoke about fixed and variable annuities, and then we spoke about whole life and universal life. Now I'm pleased that we also had a chance to comment about some of the different advice people get from folks like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman. They're quick to tell you to buy term and invest the rest. Well, we don't disagree with that advice. We think it's fine. But for some of our members, we find that insurance and the enormous tax advantages it can provide can indeed provide a valuable part of your investment portfolio. Now, each and every week, we do look to viewers like you to send questions to us, and those questions come through questions at societytoadvancefinancialeducation.org. We welcome you to send questions. And we did receive one this past week from a gentleman. I want to address that question for you tonight. The situation simply is this: he's a mid-40s person, pre-retirement if you will, makes a high five-figure income, and he's got a little bit put away but not nearly enough. So he asked the Society how we could help him put more away toward his retirement. Well, we spoke to him directly about, first of all, retirement and what that means. Several years ago, I spoke to a Chamber of Commerce. I mentioned to them during that speech that retirement is a relatively new phenomenon in the world. It started really just before World War II. And if we look at retirement, take Social Security as a good example. When it was released, it started retirement at 65 years old. But you know why? Because that was the average life expectancy of a person. Well, today, through advances in medical technology, dietary regimes, we now look to have prosperous lives into our 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s. So first thing we talked about is perhaps this gentleman considering extending his productive work life to maybe 70 years old or 72. Not only does that give him more time to build wealth, but it also reduces the backside time where he has to live off of acquired wealth. Now, secondly, as we talked about what to do, we certainly encouraged him every way we could to maximize the contributions he's making to his tax-deferred programs like IRAs, Roth IRAs, or 401ks. Those allow you to build a retirement in a tax-deferred environment so that the power of compounding plays for you. We also did speak to him about, once that maximum's been met, possibly using some insurance products to put a tax deferral around other assets. Now clearly he has more questions to ask, and we'll continue to work with him, but we encourage you to do the same as he did and write us at questions at the Society to Advance Financialeducation.org. We welcome those questions, and we do try to respond to them as fast as we can. Now each and every week we work to give you the information you need in three key areas of your life. We talk about geopolitical issues, economic issues, and financial issues. Well, looking in the geopolitical world of last week, we do find that we continue to be concerned with the events going on in Syria. Last week, the United States, together with its allies, began an active bombing campaign. Well, the Russians didn't take too kindly to that, with Mr. Putin in Moscow actually threatening to retaliate if those bombs got directed at Syria's dictator Assad. It's a very fine line we're walking there. We wish all the troops the best, and certainly all the victims of what's gone on in the Middle East. But we hope that our government and the governments around the world can find a great deal of wisdom as they continue to pursue peace in the Middle East. Secondly, we talked last week about Scotland and its endeavor to have freedom from the British Empire. Well, last week, at the end of the week, we started to see more of a freedom movement come out of Hong Kong. You may recall Hong Kong was a British protectorate up until the later part of last century, and it was purchased by the Chinese with guarantees that they would leave Hong Kong free. Well, China has backed down on that, and while they're still offering some measure of freedom, they intend to severely curtail it, and the residents of that little island didn't take too kindly to it. The fact is we had massive riots last week, and the markets this week reacted with some additional volatility because of that. When you look at the volatility around the globe, you want to be very aware of the impact of that on your wealth. There's an interesting exchange-traded fund, and we've talked about those in the past, but one called the VIX. It's a measure of volatility, and we've seen the VIX run from its low this year of 10 up to about $15 a share. That's quite an increase on a volatility benchmark, and that tells you where the markets think volatility is headed. In addition, we saw in France for the very first time the election of a very, very far right-wing political party to the parliament. What's called the National Front Party had elected its first officer there, and we find that interesting because it's a reflex against the socialist government that had been elected in France. Well, the people of France have seen a great deal of capital fly out of that country, and I think this is part of their responding to that, saying that, well, free markets may just be a prescription that France needs. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. In the economy, Bloomberg News reported that the U.S. economy grew by 4.6% in the second quarter. That exceeded expectations that were at about 4.1%. Now, we've talked about this on news and radio and TV. We believe that the second quarter had an extreme rebound because of the dismal first quarter. We're not sure that that growth rate is sustainable, and the leading economic indicators that came out just 2 weeks ago don't point to that kind of a growth rate sustaining. But we're pleased to see it, and we're glad to see the economy move in a positive direction whenever we can. Now, in the market, we did see the markets come slightly lower last week, and we believe that's a direct response to the volatility of Hong Kong. The markets have been choppy lately, and they're looking for any reason they can to move either way. So the volatility, we think, will continue as long as the political instability continues. We did also have the Federal Reserve governors out speaking in force last week, and they didn't change their tune in any way, shape, or form. We still look to the Fed to keep its policy of low interest rates low. We think that will help the markets, but certainly will hurt those of you on fixed incomes. At some point, they've got to let the lid off of that pot, and we'll see interest rates rise to natural levels. Now, there's an interesting little company that I want to talk to you about in the financial sector. Last week, we talked about the Alibaba offering. Well, this week, there's a little company called Uber that's making headlines. And what Uber is a private taxi company in effect. In many cities, like mine here in Chicago, our taxi service is highly regulated. The fares are regulated, the metrics are regulated in every possible way. Well, Uber is a little upstart that's using people's individual cars to provide taxi services to other individuals. They've gotten licensing in many of the states and are now expanding worldwide. In Germany, the German government wasn't too keen on the idea of a free market solution to transportation problems, but we'll see what the Germans do with Uber. Now, there was one bit of funny or bad news, I should say, for Uber out of San Francisco. In a very nasty event, one of the Uber drivers did kill one of their passengers. So we would caution folks using Uber like anything. Use some common sense. Now, another fine thing that you should be aware of, if you're one of those people fortunate enough to drive a Corvette, or if you valet park a Corvette, you might want to know this. Chevrolet Corporation recently introduced a brand new technology that allows the Corvette to go into a special valet mode when it's parked. And that valet mode not only locks the glove compartment, locks the audio system, but also provides telemetry data on where the car is driven, how it's driven, and it provides video of all of that. So if you're planning on valet parking a Chevrolet Corvette, you might think twice and take the Porsche instead. Now we're going to watch a quick video right now for a break. It's about a 3-minute video, and we will be right back after that with more. Welcome back. We know that little video had some good insights about the cost of using credit to acquire your goods. I think one of the most interesting insights is at the very beginning when the host of that show talked about the fact that by the time you pay off your MP3 player using credit cards, well, that technology will probably be obsolete. So we start today talking about our topic for the week, and that's the importance of the credit scores. We've talked about this a lot. We've hosted webinars and we've done many educational programs about credit scores. They are ubiquitous in our society today, following you everywhere you go. Most people don't realize that a credit score can cost you not just tens of thousands of dollars in your borrowing, but in some circumstances, credit scores can cost you your job as well. Very, very important. But I want to give you just a little bit of history to put in perspective where we are. Credit really wasn't available in the consumer economy until the 1950s. You then had the introduction of Diners Club, followed shortly by American Express. 2 charge cards, not credit cards, that allowed you to use their plastic to buy your food. Well, you had to pay the bill at the end of the month. There was no such thing as an outstanding balance, but American Express and Diners Club flourished through the 1950s. To help them with their business, there were 2 gentlemen, a gentleman named Fair and a gentleman named Isaac. And they together created the Fair-Isaac credit score, or FICO score. That's the score you hear so much about today because it has become, over the last 40 years, the industry standard in managing a person's ability to repay their credit. Now, as credit exploded in the 60s and 70s, and certainly in recent history, with the movement to virtually everyone offering a credit card, that FICO score has become enormously valuable. And we tonight want to dig into how it's constructed, how you can manage it, and how you can perhaps dig out of a problem if you're in one. Let's not forget that for those of you looking for jobs, if you're in the financial services industry or other professions like that, a credit score can negatively affect your ability to secure employment. So you want to make sure that yours is as good as it can possibly be. First of all, let's look at the cost of this to you. I mentioned tens of thousands of dollars. The average, let's say, consumer mortgage of $300,000. If you take a credit score from good to poor, the difference in that loan value is going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to you. There's a lot of money at stake. So the more you know about this particular ubiquitous item in your life, the better off you are. Let's look at the different parts of the credit score. There are 5 basic components to it. The first is just 10%, but it looks at the new credit that you get. Now let's look at what that means. I'm sure you, like me, go into Target stores from time to time, and when you check out, the generous cashier there is quick to offer you a Target credit card. The same is true no matter where you shop anymore. They ask always, take a new credit card, we'll give you a discount. Well, that may sound good at the outset, but let's not forget this component of your credit score is negatively affected when you get what's called a hard inquiry. That means you're trying to secure credit. So while you may get that credit card, it may cost you in the long run severely. Just on that point, you should be aware there are 2 types of inquiries into your credit. There's what's called a soft inquiry. And what that basically is an inquiry by you or by another institution that just reviews your credit. The hard inquiry is when you go in with a vendor who wants to establish credit for you. So Target stores or these other retail stores, be very cautious. That's a small component of your overall credit score, but it is a very real one. So we would caution you about opening up the plethora of cards available to you today. The second one is much more important, and that's the amount of credit you're using compared to the amount of credit you have available to you. And this is a tricky one that sometimes gets people caught up in unintended consequences. Let's assume for a moment you have a credit card with a $2,000 credit limit. And you've been wise and you paid off that, took advice from Dave Ramsey or others. We salute you for paying off that expensive retail debt. But the next move you make could cost you money. Some advisors will tell you to close the account, prevents you from using it again. The problem is when you do that, you eliminate that credit line. And the score you have that's based on the amount of available credit you have actually goes down. So we would caution you when you pay off your credit cards, it's not always smart to close the account. Now, we aren't saying you should continue to borrow, but we are saying that keeping some of those credit lines open can be a valuable asset for your credit score. The third thing that the FICO score looks at is the type of credit that you use. Heavily weighted toward secured credit like a home mortgage or a car loan, but also as important the retail credit you have, whether it's for clothing or groceries or medical care. The credit score is very sensitive to how you use credit, and even though we live in a more plastic age, if you use a credit card to buy small items, the FICO score will actually decrease. The assumption being that you have to use credit because you don't have cash. So we would caution you against using your credit card for those very small McDonald's purchases, and I see it done all the time. In fact, I've been guilty of it. So we want to be careful that we don't overuse small credit when in fact that could cost us tens of thousands of dollars on the big purchases. The fourth thing, and this benefits folks like me, is your length of credit. Now I'm in my 50s, so I've established a lot of credit over my life. Thankfully, most of it good, some of it not so good. But the length of credit for people as they get older is important to their score. And the relevance of this to you, if you're a parent or grandparent educating your kids, it's important that they start establishing credit very early on. We would look at 18 years old as a fine place to start because that particular component of their credit score will simply get better and better and better as time migrates on. So by the time your child is 25, 30, maybe they're out looking to buy their first house. Well, the fact that they've had credit for so long will help save thousands on that mortgage. So that's an important part. And the final one, which you can understand common sense, is your payment history. Now, the interesting fine print here we would talk to people about, many of the contracts, and this was highlighted in our short video, have in the fine print that if you miss one payment, you now fall into their default rate. And rather than having the teaser rate offered by the credit card, you fall into their higher classification rate, often in the high 20s. You don't want to be in that position, most certainly. So if you're going to use a credit card, make a payment every month. We would counsel people to at least make the minimum payment. If you're having cash trouble, at least make a minimum payment. If you have to carry the balance, that's okay. You can get out of that. But you've got to have something to show up on that account. So those are the 5 things that the FICO score looks at. Pretty simple, right? But it's the internal algorithm that's complicated. How it weights those specific things, how it looks at length of credit, types of credit, the credit you're opening. So we urge you, you are entitled under the law to receive your credit score at no charge. You can go to myfico.com, I believe it is, and you can check out your own credit score. We would urge you to do this. We find it to be prudent, just like checking your blood pressure. So check out your FICO score. And then there are several reasons that you want to do this. Number one is, of course, maximizing your score by not opening accounts, by always making payments on time, by not borrowing on the little items. Maximizing that score will directly lower your car loan costs, your home loan costs. These are real, tangible things. And when you go to get a car loan for a $30,000 car, wouldn't you rather get the preferred rate? That could be as low as 0% today. It's not a bad way to use other people's money. Now, we know that debt can be dangerous, and we, like Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman and other professionals, counsel people not to have consumer debt, especially on depreciating items. By the time you pay off the debt, the item is most often out of value anyway. So we would caution you, slow down on the debt purchases, start to build some equity that you can use to build a better future for you and for your family. Now, we also, when we talk about credit scores with people, one of the big concerns that folks have is they're going to get ripped off. There's a high number of organizations within this industry that endeavor to con people out of their hard-earned money. And one of the precepts of the society is to prevent that happening to you. So we're going to talk about some of the things that are used by the illegitimate services to get you to give them your money. But before I do that, I want to give you some respected groups. There are companies out there that can help you manage your credit score. If over the last period of time, and with the 2008 and 9 debacle in our economy, many people have blemishes on their credit scores. If you find yourself in that position, there are legitimate companies that can help get the bad information off of your record and make sure that the information there is correct. I forget the exact statistic, but it's a very high percentage of your credit reports that contain erroneous information. Well, you don't want that erroneous information costing you big dollars, so we would ask or suggest that you look into one of these possible companies. The number one rated, and these are rated, by the way, by people. If you go out and do a general poll of companies that provide good service, low cost, high visibility, a lot of disclosure, and very high success rates, these are the companies that most often get regarded. One is Lexington Law Group. You can Google them on the web. They're a law firm dedicated to helping people enhance their credit. No, we are not commercially supported by these companies. But the Lexington Law Group has developed a very good reputation for supporting its clients. We would welcome you to visit their site, but also creditrepair.com, a real simple one used by many, many people to help them both get rid of that or the untrue information, but manage what might be some negative information. Sky Blue Credit Repair comes in highly rated, as does Ovation Credit. Now, these are simply recommendations of firms that have been highly regarded by a number of people on the internet. I'm sure there are others, and we don't want to miss them, but I couldn't name them all, so those are just a few that you might want to look into. Now, on the other side of it, there are some things that companies will do to scam you out of your money. There are an awful lot of these that go on. In fact, if you look at the old-time organized crime that was involved in gambling and other illicit things, today's organized crime is involved in identity theft and credit theft. Well, these are some of the things that they do to promise you that will get you in trouble. Number one, did you know that you are entitled by law to receive a free credit report on yourself at least once a year? The three major credit reporting agencies, TransUnion, Equifax, and I've forgotten the other, but the three major credit bureaus are by law required to give that to you. If you're working with a credit repair group and they don't offer you that, well, that's a red flag. You don't want to be going down the pipe with them. Secondly, if they don't for any reason offer you a copy of the full contract, Now let's be honest, neither you or I read all of the small print in all of the contracts that we see all of the time. But some of these credit repair companies will hesitate to even send you the contract. Well, if that's the case, again, a red flag. You may not want to get in the boat with that company. Third, many of them won't disclose their fees, nor will they disclose the terms under which they'll get the job done in terms of time constraints or quality of work. Now, if you can imagine buying a product where you're not guaranteed price, time of delivery, and quality, you might not want to work with that company. Why would a credit repair agency be any different? So let's not go down that road. The other one, which is obvious, are those that ask you to pay first. We all know the internet. When people ask you for money up front, well, that should be a red flag to you to say, something doesn't smell right here. Many of these companies that ask for money up front will never be heard from again. Hold on to that hard-earned money and don't be too quick to give it out for promises that can't be fulfilled. Now, here's the other one that I want to touch on because it goes on. Some of these companies will promise you new identities. They'll promise to get you a new social security number. They'll promise to give you a clean slate. Well, please be aware that is a felony punishable by an awful lot of jail time. It may be not good to have a black mark on your credit, but that's a darn sight better than having a judge put you in jail. So if one of these companies it comes to you and offers a new identity, well, not only run away, but you should probably report them to your local law enforcement. Now, the other thing is that sometimes in the fine print, they will ask you to waive your rights under what's known as the Credit Repair Organizations Act. Now, this is in the fine print, so it's often hard to see. But you have rights, and these were passed largely in the latter part of the 2008 and 9 period to help consumers with their credit. Well, under that act, you have a number of rights, and some of these companies will actually ask you to waive your rights. Well, none of us want to do that. We have enough trouble as it is. So if you see a contract and it has a waiver of your Consumer Act rights, well, turn away. There are plenty of good companies that can help you out. Let's spend our time focused on them. So there you have it. You have some insight and information into this often misunderstood world of credit scores. We know that as you pick up information on this and any of these 5 components or a credit repair agency, you can improve your score and you can be part of that group saving thousands of dollars in their hard goods purchases. Again, auto loans and home mortgages primarily. You can do that. And if you've got problems with your credit, feel free once again to write us at questions@societytoadvancefinancialeducation.org, and we are going to answer those as best we can. We know that in a 30-minute program, we can't answer all of the questions under the sun, so we also welcome you to join us in one of our live presentations. We're here in Oak Brook, Illinois, and anytime you're in the area, please feel free to stop in. The second half of the Master of Money is dedicated to our live audience. Next week, we're going to talk about something I find to be perhaps the most common sense thing ever to win the Nobel Prize. It's called behavioral economics. Now, most of us, if we sit down, understand that our behavior and our emotions play heavily into our investment decisions, but it seems the academic world is just now picking up on this. But we're going to look at behavioral economics and behavioral finance, and we're going to talk about how you can make money on this brand new area of Nobel laureate heaven. So we want to thank you for coming out tonight. The Master of Money program is produced by the Society to Advance Financial Education. We're a not-for-profit organization dedicated to empowering people just like you with the knowledge and tools you need to thrive and prosper. As a not-for-profit, we are supported as well by viewers just like you, and we would ask that you spend a moment to think about what we're doing here, and if you believe in it as much as we do, we would ask for your support. Right below the video window, you'll find a click button for GoFundMe. That's a vehicle we use to have supporters support us. If you can afford a contribution of $5, $10, $100, that goes directly to helping the society spread this message. I assure you, the members now and the members down the line will thank you as they enter a brand new path to prosperity. So we hope you'll join us next week. Once again, I want to thank our sponsor, Harvest Investment Services, where they harvest gains and minimize losses. Visit them at Harvest Investment Services on the web. I want to thank Jim Aremka for producing tonight's program and Chris Jans for providing the music that we use to entertain. It's a pleasure always to be with you, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the next Master of Money.